Trev's Hockey Show. I'm the Trev. That's too sweet. Anyway, today we're continuing with my review of every NHL Outdoor game. And today we're on game number 10. But we find ourselves talking about the third outdoor game out of 6 to be played in 2014. And while this is the 10th game, it's only the second Stadium Series game, but it's okay. There's still lots of firsts that we can talk about here. Today we're going to talk about the Stadium Series edition of the Hudson River Rivalry, with the New Jersey Devils hosting the New York Rangers. So let's talk about it. Alright, so game 1 of the New York edition of the Stadium Series was played on January 26th, 2014 at Yankee Stadium, home of Major League Baseball's New York Yankees. So here is your first. For the first time, the NHL played back-to-back outdoor games in the same building. First time. Obviously not the last. But it was also the first time they had played 2 outdoor games in back-to-back nights, having previously had the Stadium Series in Los Angeles the night before. If you haven't seen it yet, the link's above you. Now, the NHL had been wanting to play a game at Yankee Stadium for quite some time. And if you remember, when we were talking about the 2009 Winter Classic, the NHL had wanted to play at Old Yankee Stadium, which would have been one of, if not the last event ever played at Old Yankee Stadium. But thanks to the Stadium Series being 4 games big, the NHL had not just one, but 2 opportunities, not to play in Old Yankee Stadium, but to at least get that Yankee Stadium under their belt. Now, all told, some 50,105 spectators came to see this game, which, in terms of attendance, or at least overall attendance in outdoor games, looks a little something like this. So that attendance figure would put it 6th in terms of highest attended. And even though the Stadium Series was held in New York, and was the Rangers, who are situated in New York, and the Devils, who are situated in New Jersey, the Devils were chosen as the home team, and this is thanks to a loophole with the New York Rangers and Madison Square Garden, which essentially gives the Rangers tax-exempt status, provided the Rangers do not cease playing home games at Madison Square Garden, which is generally interpreted as any home games outside Madison Square Garden. So really, in any outdoor game the Rangers play, provided it's in New York, they'll always be the road team, which I guess means for any outdoor game they don't play in New York, they're still the road team. So the Rangers will never be the home team unless the outdoor game is in Madison Square Garden, and I don't think they're blowing the roof off anytime soon. Now, game time was originally scheduled for 12:30 Eastern, but that was delayed to 1:38 due to sun glare. Now, temperature at game time was 24 Fahrenheit, or minus 5 degrees Celsius. I don't want to give you in Kelvin anymore. So let's talk the rosters. Now, as I'm fairly certain, with this being the Rangers' second game in 2 years, that there are a few guys on here that have played in more than one outdoor game. Rangers are coached by Alain Vigneault. Lundqvist is your starter, Talbot's your backup. Let's talk the Devils. This is the first outdoor game in Devils history, but there are some names familiar to the outdoor game, Michael Ryder being one of them, Jagger being another. Berger is your starter, Schneider's your backup. Coached by Peter DeBoer. So let's talk jerseys. So the Rangers are wearing something a little more along the lines of the aesthetic the NHL is going for with the Stadium Series jerseys this year. Chromy, blocky, different. It's not a bad looking jersey, actually. Let's talk about the Devils. The Devils, on the other hand, were the exception. They didn't do anything different on their throwback. It was just the throwback. The same one they wore for St. Patrick's Day games. Same one they wore in the 80s, early 90s. Just a throwback. Nothing different. Ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So, let's talk about the hockey game. Alright, so for a second straight Stadium Series game, we go against the grain and against the norm of most outdoor games where it's a scoreless first. No, not here. We got goals in the first. We got an outdoor record for most goals between teams in this first period, but before we start any goal scoring, we gotta start with the penalties first. Brian Boyle would take the game's first penalty when he got called for roughing at 2:01. And not even 18 seconds later, we're back to even strength, as Patrick Elias would get called for tripping at 2:20. Now we can talk about scoring. At the 5:36 mark, literally just over a minute after his penalty expired, Patrick Elias would score his 8th of the season. You get that from Ryan Clough at 5:36 to give the Devils the 1-0 lead. Now, after some pretty awesome opportunities on both ends, the Rangers would ultimately tie the game, as Dominic Moore would score his 4th of the season from Anton Strawman and Brian Boyle at the 9:07 mark on one of those right place, right time rebounds. And just over a minute later, Derek Brassard would get called for tripping at 10:38, and the Devils would make no mistake on this one. Patrick Elias would score on the power play his 9th of the season, or his 2nd of the game if you prefer, with a nice setup from Jaromir Jagr and Marek Zidlicki at the 11-minute mark to put the Devils up 2-1. Now, after 5 minutes of some nice back and forth hockey, and trust me when I say it could have been a goal scorer's paradise in those 5 minutes, Travis Zajac would score his 8th on the rebound from Jaromir Jagr and Mark Fane to give New Jersey the 3-1 lead. And then, 55 seconds after that, Mark Stahl would score his 3rd on the season from Dominic Moore at 16:59 on a shot that really Martin Brodeur should have had to bring the game within 1. Now we're at 3-2 for New Jersey. So now we close out the first pretty much the same way we started it, with Mark Fane getting a holding call at 19:11 to put the Rangers on the power play going into the second period. So 5 goals alone in this first period, and this first period was exciting. Everything was back to back to back to back. There was no shortage of something happening within at least 5 minutes of the last play happening, which was great to see. Shots in the first are even at 10 apiece, and early spoiler, it won't go well for the Devils beyond this point. Having said that, let's go to the second. So remember, we're going to the second, 3-2 for New Jersey. But the Rangers didn't really waste any time tying the game. Matt Zuccarello would score his 14th of the season off a slick backhand from John Moore and Derek Brassard to tie the game at 3. The only penalty of this period came at 6:14 when Marek Zidlicki would get called for cross-checking, which didn't really materialize to much for the Rangers. But after more of the Rangers pouring it on, Matt Zuccarello would score his 15th of the season, or his 2nd of the game if you prefer, from Derek Brassard and Benoit Pouliot at 12:44 to give the Rangers their first lead of the game at 4-3. And just over a minute later, Carl Hagelin would score his 12th of the year on a nice point shot that, again, Brodeur should have had from Ryan Callahan and Anton Strawman to give the Rangers the 5-3 lead. And one would think if New Jersey wanted to pull a game out of somewhere, they might want to stand up. And after a lot more New York opportunity, Rick Nash will close out the period and essentially put the game out of reach for New Jersey at the 1931 mark on a sweet setup from Derek Stepan and Mark Stahl for the 6-3 lead heading into the third period. Now the Rangers would outshoot the Devils 11-7. 4 of those shots were goals. And thankfully for Martin Brodeur, his game is over after the second period, effectively being pulled, and rightfully so. 4 unanswered, and 3 of them you should have had easily. Yeah, you're not Yankee Stadium, or you're at Yankee Stadium, and just don't know how to deal with being in Yankee Stadium. But our goalie changed. Corey Schneider takes over for the third. And I know it's easy to sit here and criticize, but, hey, even goalies have bad days too. Even the greatest of them. Just ask Marty. It happened to him. With all that being said, off to the third. So while the first two periods were full of goals and chances and opportunities, the third was really there wasn't much happening in the third. There was no goals. Well, there was one, but we'll get there. But no penalties, at least, and the shots were even down. But it was a good period in terms of the King doing King things and Schneider at least attempting to stop the bleeding. But it was a good period in terms of history and notable moments in outdoor game history. Just over the halfway point of the third period, Derek Stepan had himself a nice little breakaway on the horizon. All this while being hooked by Travis Sajak. Well, hooked and or most likely held, but still managed to at least make an attempt on that. And in the process, and according to the rules and regulations of the NHL, being hooked on a breakaway usually leads to a penalty shot. Now, for the record, this is the third penalty shot in outdoor game history, and the second in the last two games. As you remember, we had one in the Stadium Series Los Angeles game with Kopitar. The end result, though, would make Stepan the first player to score on a penalty shot in outdoor game history, as he put it blocker side on Corey Schneider to give the Rangers essentially the game at this point, and a 7-3 lead. And while I would love to say there's more beyond that, that's essentially how the rest of the period went. Just a lone goal on the penalty shot. Both goalies were keeping everything they could out of the net. So the Rangers walk away with the 7-3 win. Both teams only managed 5 shots in the third period, with the Rangers outshooting the Devils 26-22 overall. But that was, as I said, a very slow third period. But when you're up 6-3 and you score on the penalty shot to make it 7-3, I guess it doesn't ultimately matter how the period goes. You've essentially got the game in the bag. All told, 8 players recorded 2 points, and the Rangers would set a new outdoor record of goals scored by one team with 7, while the 10 games between both teams ties the record of most goals between two teams in an outdoor game. This will be a record for a while, to be perfectly honest, and when we get there, I'll let you know. This was also the most goals scored in an outdoor game since the 2009 Winter Classic. Now, as far as outdoor stats, since the inception of the outdoor games, they look a bit like this. The Rangers are ultimately undefeated outdoor games so far, but they have only played 2 at this point. And the Devils, well, they're not quite last. They're only above LA. LA hasn't scored anything. They've actually managed to score 3. That's what puts them there. So here's what I thought of the game. Well, in terms of goals, you got them. In terms of opportunities and back and forths and really, really great plays, you got them. In terms of goaltenders, other than the 3 the King let in, he was a stud in the net. If he could take a mulligan, I'm sure he would. He would have at least had 1, if not 2, go in instead of 3. But he played solid. After he was done letting goals in, he was playing pretty solid. But the goal scorers for the Rangers, as I said, 8 players managed 2 points. A good chunk of them were Rangers. Like only 2 Devils, the other 6 were Rangers. Only 2 Devils managed to score 2 points. A shooting clinic in that first period alone, it was a fabulous thing to see. So I guess in terms of how I would rate this game at this point in time, counting only the games I've reviewed, probably one of the best ones. In terms of, the goal scoring ability. I mean, in terms of rivalry, the rivalry wasn't so much there. I mean, yeah, the Hudson River separates them, and they should be I guess when you grow up with the Battle of Alberta, you get spoiled in what a rivalry should be. And yeah, I would have expected a lot more in terms of a rivalry, but I get it. Outdoor game, you don't want to be making a complete fool of yourself, right? But great game, great game. Just wish the Devils put up more of a fight in the second and the third instead of just letting the Rangers take it all the way. But that's how they play, right? Either way, that's this one. It's another one of them their Trev hockey shows. I want to thank you for tuning in. Don't think I don't appreciate the gesture, especially if you've tuned into this point. And if you are still here, if you're still watching, if you're digging what I'm saying, even if you just want to say, hey, give me a thumbs up. I greatly appreciate it. I really would. The algorithm would love it too. And for everybody who's jumped on board, thank you very much. I hope I'm not disappointing any of you, but doing what I can. That's the best approach, right? But if you want to, hit that like. If you really want, that red button that says subscribe all over it, run the mad dash to 250 or to 500. We're almost halfway. We're one away from halfway. So let's see if we can't get to 500. Links in the description below. Move forward as far as the outdoor games is concerned. Well, like I said, we're only at 3 for 2014, which means we got 3 more to go. There's another New York Rangers game right after this one, where it's more of a battle in New York instead of a Hudson, but it's the Rangers, it's the Islanders. Should be exciting, right? Either way, in the meantime, and in between time, be looking for more videos from Trev. Later.